right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to say welcome to the very first Dynamic Ed, which is a part of the Mastermind series through First Skin Ed. I'm your host today. And things that we'll cover in this mastermind series, you might have attended a different mastermind, but in this one specifically in Dynamic Ed, we want to help teachers, aspiring administrators, and school and district leaders. We want to help them grow professionally and advance their careers. And in order to do that, you need to be able to master current trends in education, implement best practices, and definitely increase student success. So that is our focus within Dynamic Ed. And our mission is to provide educators, teachers, aspiring administrators, and current administrators with the tools to grow professionally, advance their career, as I mentioned, master current trends in education, implement best practices, and increase student success. And our vision is to provide educators with access to successful professionals like the ones we have with us today, like Tom LaPlante, who can guide, advise, and empower participants as they grow. So, Dynamic Ed will enable educators to utilize and implement quality tools and resources to increase knowledge and, of course, increase student achievement and success. Okay, so our agenda for today, we will have until about 12:45, and I'll be talking about getting your resume to the top, and then Mr. Tom LaPlante will be talking about hiring and AI and tech tools for administrators. And then at the very end, I'll give you a little bit more information about Dynamic Ed and how you can register for our next session, which is on June 12th at noon. So again, that's June 12th at noon. I'll mention that again at the end. But we'll go ahead and get started about, resumes, getting your resume to the top. So why is a resume so important? Number one, we know that it's, your first impression to an organization oftentimes. And then it's also important because hiring managers generally don't have a lot of time to spend on every resume, so it needs to be impressive and usually needs to get the attention of the hiring manager within about 7 seconds. So, on average, we spend about 7 seconds or less looking at a resume and scanning it. So, what will we talk about in terms of resumes? We'll talk about the power of career summaries. We'll talk about who's reviewing your resume and how they scan it. So, if you're in education, whether you're a principal applying to be in a district level position or you're a teacher hoping to get into an assistant principal or principal position, we'll talk about who's looking at your resume and again, how they scan it. We'll talk about the questionables, the things that people ask, but things that are never really spoken out loud and just clear that have definitive answers. We'll talk about those. I have a story for you about my own experience with putting something on a resume, getting into the interview, and then having it not really be the interview I wanted to be in. So we'll talk about things to add and not add in that career summary. We'll talk about the extras, things like charts and graphs. We'll talk about whether or not to include those. And then we'll also discuss career roadmaps. I think these are often overlooked and they are super important. They're used by a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And I have some examples of career roadmaps to share with you. And then we'll talk about end goals and next steps. So, beginning with a career summary. So, first and foremost, have your name nice, big, and bold at the top. I speak from many years of experience in district administration and also at the school level, and even now working with Chase at First Skin Ed. It's really important that when I'm scanning through a resume, I see the name big and bold at the top. It's really helpful if I go back to set up interviews. It's helpful if I go back to look at the resume to set up second or third interviews. And it also really helps me remember the person's name. So always have your name big and bold at the top. And then right underneath that, sometimes I see a career summary and sometimes I don't, but it is really important to have that. And it really sums up who you are and what you do. So, very important. You'll see a lot of professionals give the advice of having a one sentence summary, but I think if you're experienced and you're including the right information, it really should be about 2 to 3 sentences. And you'll also hear some professionals recommend that you don't add adjectives, but I would say add your adjectives in there and give them a clear understanding of who you are and what you do. So, for example, on my career summary, I could just say that I'm a K-12 ed executive or I'm an ed executive, but I think it's important for me to add that I'm strategic and visionary. So, I'm a strategic, visionary K-12 ed executive. So, definitely add those adjectives. It really helps us understand what you do, who you are, especially when we're scanning through those resumes really quickly. And then include your core skills. So, my core skills in the past have been creating new systems and reforming school districts. So, that would be the next thing that I include on my career summary. And then again, make it 2 to 3 sentences because you want to list what your most impressive accomplishment or accomplishments are, especially the ones that you have evidence for. And then when you're in education, it's also very important to include the school size, the district size, and the type. Is it public or private? So, to give you an example of what my career summary would be in whole, including all of those things, I would say I'm a strategic, visionary K-12 ed executive with 20 years experience creating new systems and reforming districts. I've increased student achievement in urban, rural, and suburban public districts across the US, as evidenced by MAP, STAR, and OST results in districts ranging from 3 to 70 schools. I could also say I've worked in districts that had between 5,000 and 35,000 students. So, however you want to say that is fine, but definitely include the size. And then who is scanning your resume? And then how do we scan it? So, in education, if you're applying, if you're a teacher and you're an aspiring administrator and you're applying to be an assistant principal or a principal, it'll generally be a principal and district HR who's scanning it. If you are a principal trying to get into district administration, it will be district HR, and then it will also be the director of curriculum and instruction, and possibly an assistant superintendent and superintendent. Really depends on how big the school is. So that's who's scanning it. How we scan it, again, we're looking at that name right away, make it big and memorable. We're looking at that career summary. And then as we're going through the rest of the pages, we're looking for positions that are highly aligned to what we're hiring for, but we're also scanning really quickly to look for growth and career development. And those are two different things. So, in terms of growth, we're looking to see if you've been promoted. Have you gone from teacher to a teaching coach to an assistant principal to a principal? So, we're looking for any growth in terms of that. And then we're also looking for career development, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're showing that you've been promoted, but it does show that you've increased your knowledge and you've been refining your skills in the position that you're in. So it might include things like certificates or conferences you've presented at or big presentations that you've done. And then after that, we're scanning down to the bottom of the second page. So we see your name, we look at your summary, we scan real quick for growth and career development. And then the bottom of the second page is important because it tells us a little bit more about who you are. Generally, at the bottom of the second page, we see what degrees you hold and any type of volunteer work that you do. So we're definitely interested in that. Tells us more about you as a person, and you really want to think about what type of volunteer information you include and don't include. Make sure it's showcasing who you are as a person and how you'll perform in the job that you're applying for. So, for example, I have volunteer experience as a cheer coach, but I wouldn't necessarily put that on a resume for a position in education. I wouldn't want that to say things about me that may not be true in the position that I'm applying for. And then definitely include dates and years of experience. I often get this question from people with a lot of experience who might be a little bit concerned about ageism, but districts or organizations related to K-12, they're either looking for someone with experience in a role or without experience. And so you want to be very forthcoming and clear about whether you do or don't have that. And then I also get the question pretty often about whether or not teachers should be submitting a resume or a CV. In public ed and private ed, in that K-12 world, I would say 99% of the time you're submitting a resume. A CV should really be used if you are applying for a research-based position. So the only time I really saw people utilize a CV in a K-12 atmosphere is when they were applying to do research for a school district. And then, of course, if you're in a K-12 position, but you're applying to be a college instructor or something of that sort, you would want to use a CV. But again, 99% of the time, you're looking at utilizing a resume, even in education. And then the questionables. So I talked a little bit about age and years of experience. I would say don't be afraid to show your age. Don't be afraid to, share your years of experience. If you have it, definitely put that out there. I often get questioned about pictures. Do I like to see a headshot when I'm opening up a resume? And the answer is not necessarily. I don't think it's necessary. A lot of people say don't use the real estate on your resume. Don't take up the space for a picture. That if an employer wants to see what you look like, they're going to visit your LinkedIn profile or visit your social media. So pictures are available. We can find anything we want online for the most part, but don't take up the space on your resume. And I would also say it's just not a good idea because you don't know if that picture is appealing to the employer or not. You don't know what kind of picture to include. Definitely never include anything other than a headshot. I've gotten some resumes in the past with profile pics of people at Spartan races and lifting weights and various things, and it does throw off the employer. Resume gaps. I often get asked too, should I explain a resume gap or should I just leave the dates as it is and not really explain? I would say go ahead and write a sentence and explain if you have a gap in your resume. Oftentimes, the hiring team will see a gap and they'll question it. And if there's no explanation for it, they put it to the side as like a potential red flag or something we need to ask about later. So I would say include information about any gaps you have on your resume and save the work for the employer and the hiring team. It just puts their minds at ease sometimes when they know why that gap exists. And then include your volunteer work, like I mentioned. Make sure it's relevant to the position that you're applying for. I often get the question too, should I add my social media handles? I would say it's okay to include your LinkedIn profile. I would say make sure everything on your LinkedIn profile is very consistent with your resume, though. It can be confusing for an employer if you give a link to your LinkedIn profile and the information is set up completely different than it is on your resume. It can create confusion and cause the employer to maybe question what's accurate and what's not. So make sure that they're consistent. And I wouldn't put any other social media handles on your resume. But I would make sure that if you have other social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that when you're applying for jobs, you have good, appropriate pictures that you wouldn't mind a future employer seeing on there. And then home address is important. Something else that I'll mention, Chase and I right now we're looking through a lot of resumes and we see people in other states applying for positions here in the DFW area, and it is a little bit confusing. So if you are moving, and I've definitely done this many times, if you're moving, put next to your home address that you are moving to blank area this month and this year. It just helps create clarity for the hiring manager and the hiring team. And then lastly, I get asked if paper copies of resumes are a thing of the past or if they're still beneficial. And I would say there's a couple situations, both as an applicant and as a hiring manager, that I found them to be helpful. So I did work in a district in the suburbs of Chicago, and we would often get, and this isn't an exaggeration, we would often get about 800 applicants for one teaching position. So in that role, I would often run into teachers and staff members in the district, maybe parents, people in the community, and they would come up to me with a paper resume and say, "Hey, can you review this just real quick? I know you're not at your computer. I know you're not able to look this person up immediately where we're standing. So just let me know if this is somebody you would consider." And I honestly like that because, no matter where I was, I could take it, I could review it real quick. And if I had any questions, I could just ask immediately right there on the spot. And then I didn't generally trash it. It usually went with me back to my office. So I remembered that that person was referred to me. So that is, as a hiring manager, one instance in which a paper copy of a resume was helpful. And then as an applicant myself, I never knew the power of paper resumes and sending employers portfolios and packets and folders, but it can be helpful. When I was moving from Chicago to Cincinnati, I had sent superintendents and assistant superintendents folders with my resume, my reference list, and also copies of some of the newspaper articles and magazine articles I was in, and then just an overview of some of my big projects and some of my big accomplishments. And I also brought those folders to in person sessions where I ended up meeting the right district staff that allowed me to work in the number one school in Ohio the next year and be an administrator there. And then a couple months into that position, they called me into the district office, and I was sitting with the deputy superintendent and the superintendent. And when I walked into the meeting room, they were sitting there with the folders that I had mailed probably about 7 or 8 months prior to that meeting. So they can be helpful. Some people say they're really outdated, but you never know. I think if you have an inkling that it would be helpful, go ahead and utilize those and mail those out. And then I mentioned I had a personal story. So, this is the story of a city slicker. And this will help you think about how valuable your time is, where you really want to work, and really thinking about what you put on a resume. So, this was my first time moving to Texas, and I was moving from the Cincinnati area back out here to the DFW area. And one of the things that I put in my career summary or my career profile was that I was looking forward to potentially working at a rural district. And they had all over their school website and their district website, they were proud to be rural. They were very fast growing, and now they're considered more of a suburb. But I did put in my career summary, I'd be very interested in working in this rural city and rural district. And so I did get an interview, which I was really excited about. They flew me all the way to Texas to talk to me, and they asked me to go over my experience that was relevant to that position. So I did say, well, this is a really fast growing district, and I've been in other districts in the suburbs of Chicago, and also I work for Cincinnati Public Schools that had 70 schools in it. And so I think that experience is really relevant to how fast this district is growing. And I literally had someone on the hiring team say, well, what is a city slicker like you do in here? And so I said, well, that's a great question. What is it on my resume or in my career summary that led you to call me and fly me all the way out here to talk to everyone? So they all kind of went to my resume and looked at the career summary, and they said, oh, yes, it says that you have a desire to work in a rural district, not that you have experience in a rural district. So I would say just be careful about what you include in your summary before you fly out somewhere or take the time to interview with an organization. Make sure they have read your career summary and they have an accurate view of who you are, what you do, and where you're trying to go. And then make sure your resume speaks to all of those things. And then there's the extras, the jargon, the tables, the graphs. I would say don't include these in education and so many of the application systems. If you have those in a resume, even if it's in a PDF, it generally does not come across correctly through the application system. So I would say use numbers, talk about your percentages, use professional language, but don't include a lot of jargon. And then I get asked a lot, should I have multiple resumes? And I've been there, I've done that. And I've also seen applicants with multiple resumes who have applied for different positions within a district. So I had one applicant who had a resume for a teaching position and also a resume for a coordinator position at the district level. And I would say, from a hiring manager perspective, that is a little confusing because you don't know what skills or which resume to really focus on. So I'd say keep it down to one resume. It's complicated for the hiring manager and it's complicated for you as the applicant. And then I also get asked, should I have a CV and a resume? And I'd say, again, in the K-12 realm, a resume is really sufficient unless you're applying to be a grant writer and you want to showcase all the research you've done, or you're applying to do research within a district for a district. And then something that's not often discussed is career roadmap. So I want to talk to you about whether or not it's right for you, if it will be helpful to you, and show you some examples of what a career roadmap is. And a roadmap generally is a good visual. It looks like a roadmap. It has a road, it has, stops and points in time. And this is what an example would look like for an educator. So, say you're currently a K-5 math coach. On a career roadmap, you want to show where you've been and where you're headed. So, you might have started as a teaching assistant, moved up to be a K-5 teacher, and you're currently a K-5 math coach, but you'd like to be a principal. So, this is the general outline of how this would look. And then you want to include any skills or certificates or degrees you've earned along the way, and what kind of soft skills you have, and that you can display well, that would make you a great K-5 principal. And this is an experience map, also similar to a career roadmap. This person does not have the actual road on it, but it's very similar. It goes from college experience to 1 year of work experience to 6 to 8 to 17 years experience, and so on. And experience maps or career roadmaps are really great in interviews, and they'll help you answer the question, where have you been and where do you see yourself 5 to 10 years from now? So it shows all your growth, all your career development. It can give a little bit more personal information than a resume. And it also shows the employer where you're headed or where you hope to be. So, again, this is from a person in a Fortune 500 company. And actually, within this company, they require everybody in this division to have a career roadmap or an experience map. And this is the only way that you can apply internally for positions. So they definitely want you to have this, so that everybody has a good visual for where you've been and where you're going. And this one includes some other interesting information that you could consider adding as well, like your results from a Myers-Briggs test or leadership test. You might want to add, like he has at the bottom, education and certifications. If you have a lot of certifications, you want to include that. And then just clearly outlining what you bring to the table and giving some information just about the progression in your career. So, if you would like some examples of these, you can also email me and I'm happy to share some more. But how does your resume help you interview? It definitely helps you summarize your career. So, really take the time to write a good career summary or a good career profile. It'll help you answer the question of how your experience aligns to the position that you're applying for. And then, like I said, a career roadmap is really great in an interview to say where you're headed, where you've been, what your experience has been, and that how that's preparing you for where you would like to be in 5 to 10 years. Okay, so I will open it up to questions. And I also want to mention before I start answering questions that if you would like some one on one coaching with your resume or with your career roadmap, we do that at First Skin Ed. You can email me for more information. My email is jill@firstskined.com. So I will open it up now to any questions you have. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and move on to the next portion of Dynamic Ed. So we're really excited to have Mr. Tom LaPlante with us today. He's the former CIO of Topgolf. He brings more than 30 years of experience and a broad background in the fields of travel, hospitality, retail, and entertainment. He led the expansion of Topgolf from the 5 US locations to 16 locations, which is now over 100. And he designed and led the building of scalable technology and marketing analytics. He developed that platform that enabled revenue to grow from under 40 million to over 350 million in annual revenues in less than 3 years. And you may know Topgolf now exceeds over 1 billion in annual revenues and recently was acquired by Callaway Golf. And Tom currently is providing fractional CXO services to companies looking for digital transformations, preparing to scale revenue growth, or needing a strategic shift to meet market demands. He's also worked at Caesars Entertainment, which is the world's largest gaming company, and his wide ranging career includes consulting experience with various firms ranging from some of the largest consulting companies in the world to boutique management and technology strategy companies. And then Tom built the data warehouse and analytics capabilities at multiple companies that enabled daily operational improvements, targeted marketing campaigns, as well as identifying new sources of revenue. And he's improved operations in various industries, including ed technology. So, welcome, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Hey, hi, everybody. Jill and I met a few years ago when I was in Dallas and she was too. And she was working for an ed tech platform company, and we were trying to get that company ready to scale. And so we've just kind of kept in touch because I think, she's at the forefront. How do you take technology and leverage it best for the education space? I don't know if I told you this or not, Joe, but when I first went to college, I was in the School of Education. I thought I was going to become a math teacher and then coach uh, baseball, basketball, and football in high school. So, but then I guess I started looking at some of the economics, and the harsh reality is teachers are way underpaid. So I moved into the technology sector. But one of the things that I wanted to ask each of you, and I'm pretty sure this is more of a rhetorical question, but have you guys heard of AI now? Of course you have. So I think one of the biggest questions for each of you, and certainly as you're looking at trying to get hired in some of these new school districts and stuff, or how can you individually prepare yourself to leverage what's happening in AI and get in front of that new trend? It's very, very similar to about 20 years or so ago when the social media platforms came out. And we've seen this throughout history, right, of technology advancements. Way back when telephones came out, they wouldn't let the employees use the telephone because they thought they were going to impede their productivity. Same thing when the internet came out. Many, many corporations banned accessing the internet. Social media was the same thing. They didn't want you to be on Twitter or Facebook or any of these other social media platforms. The companies figured out that this was a trend that was going to happen regardless. And same thing with artificial intelligence. So now the question, though, is how can you individually get ahead of that curve as well as be able to use it for your own personal career advancements? I don't know. Have each of you gone on and gotten on and set up an account with Chat GPT or the Google one? If you haven't, and even if you have, I would strongly encourage you to get on there and start playing with it, because one of the things that you'll see is that the changes that um, are going to happen in industry, every industry. This is going to modify how people do everything going forward. I view this as kind of the next biggest change in our society since the internet got adopted, and even then it took multiple years for that transition. So if you think back of prior to this new millennium, it was very difficult to find information online, much less conduct e-commerce. And now you're pretty much tied in with your phone. I mean, you guys probably do your online banking, car reservations, travel reservations, shopping. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Well, this was all spurred by the internet revolution and a lot of the background stuff that happened there. Well, I believe that the impact on our society, and certainly in the education space, is going to be the same with this AI. So now, as educators, is how can you best utilize and prepare for that? The universities have been trying to deal with this now in a very, very short 18 months. Not sure they're going to be able to get ahead of it, but for each of you personally and professionally, being able to start, whether it's the prompt engineering, because guess what? If you're a teacher or even if you're an administrator of other teachers, these kids out there are going to be doing it. I mean, between all the advent of Snapchat and TikTok, I know I've got a soon to be 15-year-old daughter, and I've asked her about, oh, okay, where do you get your information and what are you doing? She goes, oh, I'm on TikTok. And I said, okay, are you like, doing anything with AI? And she goes, yeah, we've looked at that a little bit. But what's going to end up happening is some of her peers are going to say, oh, hey, here, you can do your homework this way. You can write your essay. You can do these things. Those things have already happened. In fact, they're showing universities have started figuring out that plagiarism is starting to happen. And maybe not even the plagiarism, but using the Chat GPT or the Google large language learning modules. So, a couple key things there. You need to be familiar with what prompt engineering is and what it means. There are a bunch of free stuff out there that you can leverage and use. You can pay $49 for a course or get some templates and get on there and just really start playing around with it. Because I think you're going to find some things, whether it's course construction, whether it's curriculum construction, or even how do you recognize, whether a kid has been able to use one of these. Now they're trying to come up with some different ways of, hey, was this Chat GPT generated versus the students? I mean, now it's plagiarism back in my day in school was, oh, we copied word for word out of the encyclopedia. For our kids, it's, oh, they cut and pasted something off of the internet, off of Wikipedia or something else. And those that weren't as deceptive with it, just did a blanket cut and paste, and it was pretty obvious to see. Then those that were a little bit better, they were able to rearrange the words and try to put it in their own style. But as an administrator, because I see one of your challenges is how do you take these latest tools and incorporate them into the learning process? Because when I was sitting there thinking about, okay, my education, as well as, and I taught at a community college, I found it more important that the student understood and learned the concept rather than just memorized or a certain set of facts or if they got an A. So, how can you take these different tools out there, technology wise, and incorporate them into a learning environment for the students? I mean, does it matter if somebody went and got it on ChatGPT, but then they were able to fully explain and understand of what that response was? To me, that I would find that the most important. So, how do you do that versus making it? Oh, gee, you cut and pasted or copied this out of Chat GPT, and you didn't really learn anything, which is different than, oh, okay, if they do understand it, because if they understand it, then they were able to take that tool and leverage it. I mean, I view it the same as when Excel came around. I remember this is how long ago I've been in technology. We did our budgets on those accounting green sheets with a calculator. And then when Excel came, and it was obviously it sped up the rote mundane task, and then we were able to do the analysis. So, how can you take these different technology tools and help your students as well as the teachers leverage and improve the understanding and the learning process for the students? For me, I never really cared about, oh, okay, how did the student get to the point where they understood that material and knew how it applied? I thought that was the most important thing. So hopefully, I think with some of these new tech tools that are out there. So then, And in fact, Jill, you did a great job on summarizing because I think that the whole resume and getting your name out there is probably appropriate for any industry. A couple other things that I would add on to that is with all the social media and the LinkedIn, certainly with LinkedIn, I think that's probably the most prevalent. But use that to leverage your network. I mean, I've been stunned the number of times because even most of the career jobs that I've gotten, uh, very few of them have been that I've applied for a resume. It's always been some kind of networking. That's how I got the top golf job. A buddy of mine that I worked with in Vegas called me up and said, "Hey, I can't take this job, but this looks like you. It's technology, it's marketing, analytics, and it's golf." And so he put me in touch with a recruiter. So I would add that to that. There's still nothing that replaces a warm handoff of, "Hey, Dr. Jill called me up and said I should talk to you, Michael, and you're the hiring manager," or vice versa, or handing somebody a physical resume and getting a handshake at some kind of networking event. So being able to use that, trying to identify the new tools that are out there about how do you network. I mean, there's all kinds of primers out there, and then I think with this Chat GPT and other stuff, it's a great source of resourcing and doing summarization of the different tools out there. Learn more about how do you grow your leadership skills, because I think as an administrator, I view that as a head coach, right? You're not going to be out there playing. You're not going to be out there teaching. But your job is to find the right individuals and put them in the right positions, and that's all about leadership. So, how do you take this latest technology? How do you increase your networking, and then how do you improve and enhance your leadership skills? I mean, and those are probably tried and true for any industry, and certainly in the teaching profession. So those would be kind of some things that I would focus in on and looking at some of the tools. I know Jill mentioned about the social media. I'm sure you guys have seen different cases and the extreme examples where somebody had something on, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, that blew them out of a water of a job. So be careful with that about who you're connected with, because the stuff that they post gets put on your feed. And I've had a couple of second tier relationships. They go, "Well, why don't you accept my Facebook post?" And they called me out, and I said, "Well, okay, you want the blunt, honest truth?" And they go, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you post stuff that's really kind of a diatribe on just random stuff that, frankly, I just don't want on my feed." They're like, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Well, yeah, when you're dropping the F bomb and saying, and it may be about your local team or whatever, I don't want it." And that unfortunately is the harsh reality of it, because these people, they will go and check, and a lot of them now, some of the ATS systems are able to do that automatically and say, "Okay, here's Joe's profile of all the social media feeds," and guess what? People go check it because they want to know, who am I actually getting and who am I hiring. So those are kind of my takeaways, and hopefully they dovetailed on a lot of what Jill was saying. Any questions, comments?
I think that's a great point about the social media pieces. I know there's not been one job I've ever hired for that I haven't stopped to go look at their social media. So to
Exactly.
know that there's tools that can help me do that quicker, that's even better.
Yeah, no, it's pretty stunning out there. And in fact, I saw this. I knew her casually from Austin. She was working at a huge PE company, had a master's, an MBA, and was working on her PhD. Uh, Exceptionally smart woman. But and this was 20 years ago. She had a blog, and the blog was kind of interesting, but it certainly wasn't appropriate. And then I noticed after about 6 months that she took all of that stuff down. And I said, "Hey, Kaylin, what happened?" And she goes, "Well, I was told that that really wasn't appropriate." And she goes, "It's just my own side thing." I said, "Well, I understand, but." So fortunately, she didn't lose any jobs for it. But I mean, we've seen that. We've seen kids, lose their acceptances into some of the major universities and stuff. So yeah, social media. I mean, it's there, so just be careful with it. And I'd say that for any of the technology stuff, you have to kind of pay attention to it and get familiar with it. Because guess what? The kids that are in the classrooms, they will know about it.
Yeah, and Tom, I'd like to add too, I think social media is honestly another reason why you should include your years of experience because oftentimes on social media there's other people with the same name, crazy profile
That
pictures, and
too.
you definitely want them to be able to identify which one is you. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you have to. In fact, I guess when I was interviewing for the Top Golf job, that was back in 2011. And I'd been in Austin for a couple of years, and that was kind of the second hub of the social media stuff. And so I signed up for all of it and started doing research. Wrote a couple of blogs on, usage of Twitter and it was Foursquare, I think at the time. I mean, this is for Instagram. Now, Facebook was obviously around, but that was still only like 4 years after they opened it up for non-college students. And I was just curious about it, and so I started doing it and started, posting different stuff. And I remember the chairman of Topgolf asked me, he goes, "Okay, you're on all these social media platforms," and I mean, I was 54 at the time. He goes, "Aren't you a little old for that?" And I sort of laughed, and I said, "Well, no, I think it's just I'm curious, and if we're going to do marketing and do data analytics, this is coming out there, and it's going to be here." And so that really, it was kind of interesting. He was like, "Oh, okay," and that helped because in fact, I even had the director of marketing say, "Okay, what are you doing on with Foursquare and Twitter?" And I said, "Well, Foursquare is location based, and I want to know when people are coming to Top Golf and what they're tweeting about and how they're posting it to Facebook, and capturing that data is going to be important for us, being that we're an entertainment venue." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And so I noticed that she went and signed up for all that stuff after we interviewed. So, but yeah, you're right, Joe. There is so much information out there, and much of it can be either incorrect, whether it's intentional or not, or you just happen. I mean, if your name is John Smith, there's going to be a lot of John Smiths. And so just being aware of that and making sure, especially as you're looking to apply for jobs and stuff. But the other key thing I think for each of you is, okay, focus in on developing your leadership skills, because as an administrator, that's what you're going to be charged with. Heads of your departments and the actual teachers of getting them aligned with your vision for your school or the district.
all right, thank you,
Thanks,
Tom.
Joe.
Does anyone have questions for Tom or me? All right. Well, I am going to go back to sharing. All right. So I want to just say thank you again for joining us today. And if you're interested in signing up for more dynamic ed sessions, you could do so at www.firstskined.com/masterminds. And then there's a link at the bottom of this slide that I'll send out to everybody. So if you're interested in registering for future sessions, you can do that and also give us some feedback on today's session. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.